by 17, motivated by both patriotism and his unique linguistic abilities, Gabaldon enlisted in the Marine Corps. His Japanese was far from perfect academically, but it was fluent in daily conversation, shaped by years of family life rather than formal instruction. By March 1944, he was assigned to the headquarters and service company of the 2nd Marines, 2nd Marine Division, serving as a scout and observer, a role specifically designed to leverage his cultural and language skills. The unit was preparing for Operation Forager, the Allied invasion of the Mariana Islands. Saipan alone was defended by approximately 30,000 Japanese soldiers, accompanied by an unknown number of civilians, many of whom had been thoroughly indoctrinated. Military intelligence warned of widespread civilian resistance. Grenades were handed to families, children were taught to attack Americans, and mothers were warned that Marines were criminals who would commit atrocities. Propaganda had painted the Americans as monsters who would abuse women and kill children. Into this atmosphere of fear and indoctrination stepped a young Marine who would challenge every assumption with words rather than weapons. Gabaldon's ability to navigate the intersection of culture, language, and human psychology would make him one of the most effective single-handed agents of surrender in the Pacific War. The stage was set for extensive civilian suffering. On June 15, 1944, Private First Class Guy Gabaldon landed on Saipan alongside the main invasion forces. The ensuing battle stretched until July 9, with U.S. troops gradually forcing Japanese soldiers and civilians toward the northern regions of the island. What set Gabaldon apart from his fellow Marines was not his combat skill, but his willingness to conduct unsanctioned nighttime operations. Records from the Marine Corps and Gabaldon's Navy Cross citation describe him acting independently, often leaving his unit under the cover of darkness to engage Japanese positions alone. His tactics were unconventional but yielded results. He would approach caves, bunkers, and other hiding places, speaking directly to those inside in Japanese, assuring them he was unarmed and alone, and that surrender would be met with humane treatment. Gabaldon's first notable success occurred early in the campaign. One night, he stationed himself outside a cave and initiated a conversation in casual Japanese, discussing food, safety, and the conditions prisoners faced. After hours of patient dialogue, a group of Japanese soldiers emerged and surrendered. News of these unconventional victories spread quickly among his peers, though his commanders initially viewed his approach with skepticism. Unlike typical military interpreters who relied on loudspeakers and formal commands, Gabaldon's method was personal and culturally informed. He spoke respectfully, employing colloquial Japanese and subtle cultural cues he had learned from the nanos, which helped him establish trust. The defining moment of Gabaldon's wartime service occurred on July 8, 1944. By this stage, American forces had confined the remaining Japanese military and civilians to the island's northern sector. The situation was dire. Mass civilian suicides were already underway at locations that would later be known as Suicide Cliff and Banzai Cliff, where hundreds of residents, fearing capture and torture, leapt to their deaths along with their children. On that day, Gabaldon approached a large cluster of Japanese in caves and bunkers. While the exact details of his conversations remain unrecorded, the results are documented. He returned to U.S. lines with 87 prisoners, a mix of soldiers and civilians. This single-day surrender ranks among the largest in U.S. military history, attributed to one individual. Marine Corps intelligence officers, including Colonels Walter Lear and John Schwaber and Major James High, later confirmed these figures on the 1957 television program, This Is Your Life. Gabaldon's exceptional exploits brought both acclaim and doubt. Captain John Schwab recommended him for the Medal of Honor on July 15, 1944, mere days after the large-scale surrender, but General Holland Smith, commander of the Expeditionary Forces, opted to downgrade the award. His final Navy Cross citation noted that, operating alone on the front lines, Private First Class Gabaldon repeatedly entered enemy caves, bunkers, buildings, and jungle terrain under fire, securing critical intelligence and capturing over 1,000 enemy personnel, both civilians and combatants. Despite these official accolades, some contemporaries expressed reservations. Lieutenant Robert B. Schick, a Marine Japanese language officer on Saipan, later questioned certain aspects of Gabaldon's claims, suggesting he had a tendency to exaggerate. The lack of witnesses during his solitary night missions makes precise verification challenging. Gabaldon's achievements should be understood against the backdrop of the harrowing Saipan campaign. The island witnessed some of the fiercest fighting of the Pacific Theater, resulting in more than 3,000 U.S. fatalities and nearly complete destruction of the 30,000-strong Japanese garrison. Civilians suffered horrifically as well. An estimated 22,000 perished, many choosing suicide over capture. Gabaldon's actions, whether fully documented or partially anecdotal, unfolded amid this grim and chaotic environment, highlighting both the brutality of the battle and the unusual nature of his wartime service. The mass civilian suicides on Saipan left American forces deeply unsettled. In extreme acts of desperation, parents hurled their children from cliffs before taking their own lives, while entire households would sometimes die together by detonating grenades. Years of Japanese military propaganda had instilled a pervasive fear among civilians that being captured by American troops would inevitably lead to brutal torture, sexual assault, or even cannibalism. Against this harrowing backdrop, the achievements of Guy Gabaldon stand out as extraordinary. His ability to persuade Japanese soldiers and civilians to surrender, often when others believed it impossible, highlights how profound cultural insight and linguistic skill could counteract even the most intense wartime indoctrination. Every individual he convinced to lay down arms represented one fewer casualty in a campaign already marked by staggering civilian losses. During the later stages of the Saipan campaign, Gabaldon was wounded by enemy machine gun fire while undertaking one of his solo operations. Although his official Navy Cross citation mentions these injuries, it does not provide precise details regarding the date or location of the incident. Nevertheless, despite sustaining serious wounds, Gabaldon continued his missions until he was eventually evacuated for medical care. Once recovered, he returned to active duty, participating in additional operations across the Pacific, though none would reach the scale or impact of his work on Saipan. His documented record for the war includes the capture of more than 1,000 Japanese combatants and civilians, with most accounts estimating around 1,500 individuals in total. For his actions on Saipan, Gabaldon was initially awarded the Silver Star, which was later elevated to the Navy Cross on November 23, 1960. This recognition made him the highest decorated Marine of Mexican-American descent during World War II. The Navy Cross, as the second highest decoration for valor in the Navy and Marine Corps, is surpassed only by the Medal of Honor. There have been multiple campaigns aimed at upgrading Gabaldon's Navy Cross to the Medal of Honor. Figures including Los Angeles Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa, the Hispanic Medal of Honor Society, and several congressional representatives have all advocated for this recognition. Officially, these efforts have been blocked due to statutory time limits for reconsidering military awards, although some observers suggest that unconventional methods of warfare may have contributed to the reluctance. Beyond debates over medals, historians have also raised questions regarding the plausibility of one individual achieving such high numbers. Skeptics point to the difficulty of verifying his actions, as Gabaldon often operated alone at night without witnesses. However, Marine Corps intelligence officers did confirm his accomplishments, and the Navy Cross citation stands as formal acknowledgement of his extraordinary contributions. In 1960, Hollywood released Hell to Eternity, a film purportedly inspired by Gabaldon's story. The movie starred Jeffrey Hunter, a tall, blue-eyed actor, as Gabaldon, effectively erasing the soldier's Mexican-American heritage. The film transformed Gabaldon's careful and patient negotiation skills into dramatic action sequences, replacing cultural understanding with stereotypical American hero bravado. Gabaldon himself reportedly found the cinematic portrayal disappointing, as the movie emphasized combat over dialogue and violence over diplomacy, turning a story of intercultural bridge building into a conventional war spectacle. These distortions had a lasting effect, shaping public perception of his achievements for decades. Decades later, in 1990, Gabaldon published his memoir, Saipan, Suicide Island, later reissued as America Betrayed. In his book, he recounted his experiences from the war, offering a first-hand perspective on his missions. Historians, however, caution that memoirs written long after events require careful scrutiny regarding factual accuracy. Throughout his writings, Gabaldon stressed that his successes were rooted in viewing Japanese soldiers and civilians as human beings rather than mere enemies, in understanding their cultural context beyond the language itself, and in relying on patience and empathy rather than brute force. His story remains a powerful example of how cultural intelligence and humane strategy can achieve extraordinary results even amidst the horrors of war. Gabaldon spent countless hours outside enemy caves during the war, engaging in long conversations about survival, food, family, and personal safety. These discussions gradually transformed fear into a fragile trust, allowing him to carry out his missions with greater effectiveness. Following the conclusion of World War II, he transitioned back to civilian life and eventually made Saipan his home for 2 decades, where he established a small-scale fishing enterprise. During this period, he married and fathered 11 children, 9 of whom lived into adulthood. For many years, Gabaldon shared his wartime experiences at schools, military events, and public gatherings, consistently highlighting the critical role of cultural awareness and understanding in conflict situations. On July 7, 2006, his contributions were formally recognized when Los Angeles Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa honored him at City Hall, celebrating his unique place in American military history. Tragically, just a few weeks later, on August 31, 2006, Gabaldon passed away at the age of 80 in Old Town, Florida, due to heart disease. He was laid to rest at Arlington National Cemetery with full military honors. Gabaldon's story is closely linked with that of Lane Nano, one of his adoptive brothers from the Japanese-American family that had taught him the Japanese language. Nano served in the legendary 442nd Regimental Combat Team, a unit comprised almost entirely of Japanese-American soldiers. The 442nd became the most highly decorated unit of its size in U.S. military history, earning an astonishing 9,486 Purple Hearts and 21 Medals of Honor. While Gabaldon applied his Japanese language skills to protect and save Japanese lives in the Pacific Theater, Nano demonstrated the loyalty and courage of Japanese-American soldiers in Europe. Their parallel experiences reflect a remarkable and often overlooked facet of World War II history, particularly considering that their extended Japanese-American family remained confined in internment camps throughout the war. Nano survived the conflict and lived until April 28, 2005, maintaining correspondence and a lifelong connection with Gabaldon. Together, their lives illustrate the complex intersections of heroism, racial prejudice, and personal bravery during the war. While Gabaldon's direct impact on formal military doctrine is difficult to quantify, his wartime methods have been widely cited within the U.S. military as instructional examples for psychological operations personnel. His work demonstrated that deep cultural knowledge, combined with language proficiency, could be leveraged to achieve strategic advantages on the battlefield. Over time, the U.S. Marine Corps and other military branches have integrated lessons derived from Gabaldon's approach into their training programs, emphasizing the value of preparing soldiers to understand and navigate local cultures. Though official manuals rarely cite him by name, his legacy has influenced contemporary thinking on military language instruction and cultural readiness. Modern conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan have reinforced the enduring relevance of Gabaldon's principles. Units that employ interpreters who possess both linguistic skill and cultural insight consistently report improved relations with civilian populations and more effective operational outcomes. His experiences serve as a reminder that success in military operations often relies as much on empathy and cultural fluency as on conventional tactics or firepower. The approach demonstrated by Gabaldon, showing that a deep understanding of an adversary's culture can be as decisive as raw military force, continues to hold relevance in modern conflict scenarios. Historians place his contributions within the larger framework of the Pacific War, particularly during the intense struggle for Saipan. This battle stands out as one of the most devastating confrontations of the war, with Japanese combatants experiencing casualty rates surpassing 90%. Against such a backdrop of extreme loss, Gabaldon's ability to persuade Japanese soldiers and civilians to surrender was remarkable. Prominent Pacific War scholar Dr. Gordon W. Prange highlighted Gabaldon's efforts in his analysis of individual acts of heroism during World War II. While Prange acknowledged that certain details of Gabaldon's accounts are difficult to independently verify, he emphasized that the official recognition by the U.S. Marine Corps, specifically through the awarding of the Navy Cross, attests to the fundamental authenticity of his accomplishments. One of the ongoing challenges in evaluating Gabaldon's legacy lies in distinguishing historically verified events from embellishments added in later retellings. The central achievement attributed to Gabaldon, convincing roughly 1,500 Japanese personnel, both military and civilian, to surrender without engaging in direct combat, is well documented in military archives. Although the exact methods he employed remain somewhat opaque, the scale of his documented success is significant. Official records confirm over 1,000 surrenders, as noted in the Navy Cross citation, while the Marine Corps Museum reports the figure as approximately 1,500. Notably, on a single day, July 8, 1944, he secured 87 prisoners, a record corroborated by Marine Corps documents. His active participation in the Saipan campaign spanned from June 15 to July 9, 1944, during which he sustained injuries from machine gun fire in the later stages of combat. Gabaldon's formal military recognition reflects the gravity of his actions. He rose to the rank of Private First Class during his service and received the Navy Cross on November 23, 1960 for his extraordinary efforts. He was also awarded a Silver Star, later upgraded to the Navy Cross, and a Purple Heart for wounds suffered in action. Beyond the numbers and decorations, the human impact of his work is profound. Each surrender represented a life spared. Japanese soldiers and civilians survived due to a single Marine's choice to prioritize negotiation over violence. His methods illustrate principles now integral to psychological operations. Gabaldon's tactics relied on several key strategies. First, he deliberately presented himself as vulnerable, approaching enemy positions alone, unarmed, and making his presence known. This approach directly contradicted Japanese propaganda, which depicted Americans as merciless and overwhelmingly brutal. His modest physical stature, 5 feet 4 inches tall and weighing 123 pounds, reinforced the perception that he was not an immediate threat. Second, Gabaldon communicated in everyday conversational Japanese rather than formal military terminology. This use of familiar language conveyed genuine cultural understanding rather than a superficial knowledge acquired from phrasebooks. Third, he practiced remarkable patience, often spending hours outside enemy-held caves, talking continuously to gradually diminish fear and resistance. This calm persistence challenged the Japanese portrayal of Americans as aggressive and impatient. Ultimately, Gabaldon's achievements exemplify how cultural insight, strategic patience, and effective communication can yield results that conventional military power alone cannot achieve. The documented evidence of his actions, alongside the human lives saved, underscores the enduring relevance of his methods for both historical study and contemporary military strategy. Offering dignity in surrender, Gabaldon's experience on Saipan. Gabaldon's fourth key approach in the war was offering dignity in surrender. Rather than demanding unconditional capitulation, he framed surrender as a way to protect families and preserve life for Japan's future reconstruction. This reframing created psychological space for surrender without a complete loss of honor. To understand Gabaldon's achievement, one must consider the intensity of Japanese propaganda on Saipan. Military authorities had told civilians that Americans would torture all captured men, rape all women, and even eat children. Propaganda depicted Americans as cannibals who desecrated Japanese bodies and destroyed Japanese culture. This messaging was reinforced by military police forcing civilians toward cliffs, officers distributing grenades to families, and constant repetition that death was preferable to capture. Civilian suicides were portrayed as martyrdom for the emperor. Against this wall of propaganda, Gabaldon's ability to convince anyone to surrender seems almost impossible. Yet he repeatedly succeeded through patient demonstration that the propaganda was false. His very presence, a small young Marine speaking Japanese, approaching alone, contradicted everything civilians had been told about Americans. Lessons for today. Gabaldon's experience remains relevant in conflicts where civilian populations are caught between combatants. Cultural understanding can prevent casualties far more effectively than firepower. His methods suggest several key principles. Language skills must be paired with cultural knowledge. Individual initiative can achieve results that formal military operations cannot. Patience and respect can overcome even intense propaganda. Treating enemies as potential future allies can create unexpected opportunities. Small unit or individual operations can succeed where large-scale operations fail. These lessons have been applied with varying success in recent conflicts such as Iraq and Afghanistan. Units that invested in cultural training and language skills reported better outcomes in civilian interactions. However, systematic application of Gabaldon's approach remains limited by military doctrines that prioritize force protection and conventional operations. The question of verification. Gabaldon's story is not without skepticism. Some, like Lieutenant Robert B. Sheik, described him as a relentless self-promoter, and his nighttime solo operations made independent verification difficult. Yet several factors support the essential truth of his achievements. Official military recognition. The Navy Cross citation formally acknowledged his accomplishments. Intelligence officer verification. 3 Marine intelligence officers publicly verified his capture numbers in 1957. Contemporary documentation. Marine Corps records from 1944 document the capture of 87 prisoners on July 8. Logical consistency. His documented Japanese language skills and the fact that many Japanese did surrender on Saipan despite propaganda further support his story. Although the precise details of Guy Gabaldon's operations are difficult to independently verify, the overall impact of his actions is well documented and widely recognized. Gabaldon successfully persuaded a substantial number of Japanese soldiers to surrender during World War II without resorting to direct combat. His achievements were formally acknowledged in military records and earned him one of the highest honors available in the United States Armed Forces. Gabaldon's story goes beyond conventional measures of battlefield success. It highlights the extraordinary effect that cultural insight and cross-cultural communication can have in situations of extreme conflict. His fluency in Japanese was not limited to words. It encompassed a deep understanding of social values, concepts of honor, familial duty, and shame that guided Japanese behavior. He could interact with enemy soldiers not merely as an opponent, but as someone attuned to their worldview. This unique capability stemmed from Gabaldon's personal history. A Mexican-American, he spent part of his upbringing in a Japanese-American household, absorbing cultural norms and social expectations that most military personnel would never encounter. Far from being a complication, this multicultural background became a decisive tactical asset, allowing him to operate effectively in ways standard military interpreters could not. Gabaldon's actions challenged the traditional military emphasis on firepower and technological superiority. During the Battle of Saipan, his individual efforts as a teenager were responsible for more surrenders than entire battalions wielding advanced weaponry. His experience suggests that military units reflecting the diversity of American society may hold advantages not captured by conventional measures of strength. The lessons drawn from his service extend well beyond wartime statistics. First, diversity can enhance operational capability. Gabaldon's Mexican-American heritage combined with his knowledge of Japanese culture created operational options unavailable to other soldiers. Contemporary forces that actively incorporate diverse backgrounds may realize similar strategic benefits. Second, non-traditional methods can accomplish objectives that conventional approaches might fail to achieve. Gabaldon often acted independently, disregarding strict military protocol, yet his results surpassed those of coordinated large-scale operations. Flexibility and innovation remain crucial to effective military strategy. Third, treating adversaries with respect rather than as mere targets can open unexpected avenues for success. Gabaldon's humane approach toward Japanese troops and civilians facilitated outcomes that aggressive tactics could have prevented. Finally, the initiative and bravery of a single individual can have far-reaching consequences. Gabaldon's actions reportedly saved around 1,500 lives, demonstrating that American forces were capable of mercy even amidst intense combat, a factor that may have influenced Japanese perceptions of Americans beyond the immediate theater. While recognizing Gabaldon's accomplishments, historical assessment must also account for uncertainties and debate. Certain specific claims about his missions lack verification by independent sources. Accounts written decades after the events may include embellishments, and the absence of witnesses complicates verification. Additionally, his post-war efforts to publicize his story could have influenced perceptions of his credibility. The direct impact of his methods on broader military doctrine remains largely undocumented. In summary, Guy Gabaldon's legacy illustrates that linguistic skill, cultural literacy, and personal initiative can produce results that traditional military strategy alone cannot achieve. His story emphasizes the strategic value of diversity, the potential of unconventional approaches, and the enduring influence of human decency and courage in warfare. While certain limitations are noted in Gabaldon's story, they do not diminish the significance of his accomplishments. Rather, they serve as a reminder that historical figures often possess layers of complexity and that the narratives surrounding them can grow and shift over time. The core facts of Gabaldon's wartime service, his Navy Cross Award, the records maintained by the Marine Corps, and confirmations from intelligence officers stand as impressive achievements even without added dramatization. The full impact of Gabaldon's efforts becomes clearer when placed in the context of the devastating toll of the Battle of Saipan. Of roughly 30,000 Japanese soldiers stationed on the island, fewer than 1,000 survived. Among about 22,000 civilians, thousands perished, many through suicide. American forces endured significant losses as well, with more than 3,000 killed and approximately 10,000 wounded. Every enemy combatant persuaded to surrender by Gabaldon represented one fewer death, one more life preserved, and one family spared grief. His record of capturing 1,500 individuals translates to 1,500 people who avoided becoming war casualties, who returned home to their loved ones, and who were able to contribute to rebuilding their communities in the post-war period. This human dimension goes beyond simple military statistics. Each person was someone's child, sibling, spouse, or parent, and every civilian spared meant a family remained intact and a future was preserved. The ripple effect of these saved lives extended well beyond the immediate conflict, influencing generations to come. After the conclusion of the war, Gabaldon's life took multiple paths. He served as a civilian interpreter during the Allied occupation of Japan before eventually relocating to Saipan. There, he lived for 2 decades, operating a fishing enterprise while maintaining ties to the island where his wartime actions had left a lasting mark. His choice to reside on Saipan suggests a profound connection to both the place and its people, including those whose lives he had spared. Although there is no documented evidence of formal reunions with individuals he saved, his prolonged presence on the island indicates continued engagement with its history and its residents. In his later years, Gabaldon became an active proponent of recognizing Hispanic contributions to USS military history. He shared his experiences at schools, veterans events, and community gatherings, highlighting themes of cross-cultural understanding and the power of personal initiative. Through these efforts, he helped bring greater visibility to the role of Hispanic service members in American military achievements. Gabaldon's interment at Arlington National Cemetery stands as a formal acknowledgement of his extraordinary service. The cemetery's stringent eligibility criteria underscore the significance of this honor, confirming the military's recognition of his remarkable contributions. His gravesite has since become a point of interest for those exploring Hispanic military history and unconventional warfare. Various organizations have commemorated Gabaldon's legacy. Hispanic veterans groups celebrate him as a model of Latino excellence in the armed forces. Marine Corps units studying psychological operations often refer to his tactics, and language training programs highlight his story as a demonstration of the strategic importance of cultural intelligence. Nevertheless, Gabaldon remains relatively obscure outside specialized military history circles. Unlike some celebrated war heroes, he is not memorialized with a ship, a museum exhibition, or a major public monument. His story, while extraordinary, continues to be largely under-recognized in the broader historical narrative. Guy Louis Gabaldon remains a relatively under-recognized figure, possibly due to discomfort with unconventional military strategies or lingering doubts about the scope of his accomplishments. Yet in the context of modern asymmetric conflicts marked by insurgency, cultural friction, and civilian casualties, his methods offer enduring lessons. Contemporary military experiences in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, and other theaters demonstrate that battlefield victories depend on more than sheer firepower. Understanding the local culture, fostering trust with civilian populations, and providing non-violent alternatives are essential components of success. Many principles now formalized in counterinsurgency doctrine were intuitively applied by Gabaldon decades earlier. On Saipan, Gabaldon displayed exceptional skill in combining language proficiency, cultural insight, patience, and strategic empathy. He recognized that potential adversaries could also be persuaded to act as allies under the right circumstances. His approach foreshadowed the modern concept of population-centric operations, yet even today, military institutions frequently fall short of integrating these lessons consistently. Training in local languages often remains superficial, cultural intelligence is treated as secondary, and conventional combat operations typically overshadow patient engagement strategies. Gabaldon's experiences suggest that fully leveraging these approaches could dramatically improve operational outcomes. A central element of Gabaldon's success was his deep comprehension of Japanese notions of honor. Rather than forcing enemy combatants into humiliating surrender, he provided paths that allowed them to retain dignity, protecting families, preserving life for future contributions, and choosing survival without shame. This nuanced perspective enabled Japanese soldiers and civilians to surrender without experiencing total psychological devastation. Misunderstanding or disregarding such cultural frameworks in combat often results in unnecessary casualties, highlighting the strategic value of Gabaldon's approach. By aligning his actions with the enemy's cultural and ethical codes, he created opportunities for peaceful resolution that conventional military methods would likely have overlooked. Gabaldon's personal integrity further amplified his achievements. Operating in isolation and without direct supervision, he had the opportunity to embellish his actions for recognition, yet subsequent Marine Corps intelligence verification confirms that his accounts were fundamentally accurate. Throughout his service, he demonstrated extraordinary courage and moral responsibility, saving an estimated 1,500 enemy lives through individual initiative, cultural knowledge, and calculated bravery. His Navy Cross citation formally acknowledges this exceptional heroism. The story of Gabaldon illustrates that the measure of a military hero is not solely the number of enemies defeated, but often the lives spared through foresight, negotiation, and empathy. A boy from Boyle Heights who learned Japanese from his adoptive family evolved into a Marine whose linguistic and cultural skills averted mass casualties on a Pacific battlefield. His trajectory from street youth to combat hero, and later to advocate for proper recognition, reflects a profoundly American narrative, a multicultural background fostering unique abilities, personal initiative achieving extraordinary outcomes, and lifelong dedication to transmitting hard-earned lessons. While debates over particular details may persist, the overarching truth remains. Gabaldon's capacity to persuade and protect enemy lives distinguishes him as perhaps the most effective single individual in American military history at preserving life amidst the horrors of war. On the bloodied terrain of Saipan, where Japanese soldiers and civilians often saw no path but death, a single Marine extended an unexpected chance at survival and was trusted. Beyond the layers of legend and debate surrounding his story, the documented accomplishments of Guy Gabaldon are remarkable in their own right. Born a Mexican-American teenager and raised in part by Japanese Americans, Gabaldon became fluent in Japanese, a skill that allowed him to prevent the deaths of roughly 1,500 enemy personnel during the Battle of Saipan. Military documents confirm that on July 8, 1944, he personally secured the surrender of 807 prisoners. His official Navy Cross Award further validates the significance of these achievements. Gabaldon's heroism did not arise from sheer physical force or conventional combat prowess. Rather, he distinguished himself by acting as a bridge between cultures, negotiating surrender through empathy, language, and respect. Unlike typical soldiers whose victories were measured by the number of enemies they eliminated, Gabaldon's success was measured by the lives he preserved. He was not a commanding interpreter issuing ultimatums. He was a mediator who treated defeated soldiers with dignity and offered them an alternative to the mass suicides that propaganda and fear had driven so many to embrace. His story illustrates a broader truth about American strength. It is amplified not only through firepower, but also through diversity and the unique advantages it can create. The young man from Boyle Heights, whose upbringing included Japanese influences, found himself uniquely suited to this role. His multicultural identity translated directly into a tactical advantage on the battlefield. Nicknamed the Pied Piper of Saipan, Gabaldon's reputation rests entirely on verified actions rather than myth. On an island where countless individuals were coerced into taking their own lives, his patient, culturally attuned appeals convinced many to surrender instead. That approximately 1,500 Japanese soldiers and civilians heeded his voice despite intense indoctrination regarding American brutality underscores the profound impact of cultural insight in moments of extreme violence. Gabaldon's wartime efforts demonstrate that understanding the humanity of one's adversaries can open opportunities that mere military might cannot. In a conflict defined by ruthless calculations of life and death, he chose to multiply lives saved rather than subtract lives taken. This legacy, thoroughly documented through military records and intelligence reports and recognized with high honors, stands as a testament to a form of heroism that diverges from traditional combat narratives. While some operational specifics may remain debated, the central fact endures. In the chaos of Saipan in 1944, Gabaldon likely saved more enemy lives through personal initiative than nearly any other American soldier. His story, when stripped of embellishment, confirms the value of cross-cultural skill, empathy, and individual action within the scope of warfare. The boy from Boyle Heights became a Marine hero not through conventional battlefield dominance, but through the careful cultivation of understanding across cultural lines, a legacy that preserved lives on both sides of the conflict. That enduring truth offers both a historical lesson and a reminder of the unique ways individuals can shape the course of human events in even the darkest circumstances.